I've lived on this piece of land for over 20 years. My ranch sits on the edge of a small Texas town where the wind carries the smell of mesquite and the sound of cicadas fills the air like a never-ending song. When I first bought the place, it was nothing more than a few acres of dry dirt, a broken-down barn, and a dream I didn't know how to chase. Over time, I built it with my own hands. Fences, cattle pens, a proper home, and even a small garage where I fixed bikes with my buddies. To me, this wasn't just property, it was a slice of peace in a world that had long forgotten what peace felt like. The local HOA, the Homeowners Association, had always been more of a nuisance than a threat. They didn't technically have authority over my land, my ranch sat just outside their official boundary. But ever since the new president, a sharp-tongued woman named Denise Harlow, took charge, they started acting like they owned half the county. She had a way of speaking that made your skin crawl, like honey laced with poison. The first letter came about a year ago, saying my property's appearance violated neighborhood aesthetic standards. I laughed at it, tossed it in the trash, and went on feeding the horses. But more letters came, then warnings, then visits from people wearing polos with HOA logos like they were some kind of law enforcement. It all started to feel personal. Maybe it was because of the weekly bike meets we hosted in the barn. The crew would ride in from all over, old friends from my days working long-haul freight, a few veterans, and some folks who just found brotherhood on two wheels. We weren't a gang, we were a family. We rode for charity, for fallen brothers, for causes nobody else cared about. But to people like Denise, we were nothing more than a threat to the community image. The sight of leather jackets and motorcycles parked near her perfect white fences probably kept her awake at night. A few months back, one of her inspectors drove up to my property without permission. He had a clipboard and a smug grin, claiming he was there to assess violations. I told him to turn his car around and get off my land before I introduced him to the barrel of my shotgun. He must have believed me, because he left faster than he came. But that incident lit a fuse. Denise called the county office, tried to report me for threatening behavior. They laughed her off, they knew my reputation, and they knew she was a busybody with too much time on her hands. Still, I could feel something building. You know that gut feeling when the air gets too quiet, when even the wind seems to be holding its breath? That's how it felt around the ranch in the weeks leading up to the crash. My dogs would bark at nothing. Trucks would slow down near the gate, then speed off when I stepped outside. I started locking everything up tighter than usual, not out of fear, but out of instinct. Then came the night everything changed. It was a Friday evening, around dusk. The sun was bleeding into the horizon, painting the sky orange and purple. My crew had just left after a long day of riding. The only sounds were the rustle of wind through the dry grass and the distant hum of crickets. I was sitting on the porch, sipping cold beer, boots propped up on the railing, when I saw the headlights. At first, I thought it was just another late visitor, maybe one of the guys coming back for a forgotten jacket. But then I noticed something strange. There were too many lights, moving too fast, and the vehicles weren't motorcycles. They were SUVs. Black. No markings. Moving in formation. I put the beer down, stood up slow, and watched them roll down my dirt road like they owned it. My stomach tightened. Something wasn't right. They stopped right outside the gate, engines rumbling, doors flying open. Men stepped out wearing tactical vests, the kind cops wear on raids, but their patches looked wrong. They were shiny, new, and not a single one said sheriff or police. Then one of them yelled, "Step out. This property is under investigation." I froze for a split second, taking in the sight. There were 6 of them, maybe 7, all dressed like some kind of private SWAT unit. Their leader, a bulky guy with a buzz cut, carried himself like he'd watched too many action movies. He had a fake badge clipped to his vest, and from where I stood, I could tell it was plastic. I didn't move. Just stared at them from the porch, letting the silence stretch until even they started to get uneasy. "This is private property," I finally said, my voice steady. "You got a warrant?" The buzzcut guy sneered. "We don't need one. HOA authorization." That's when it clicked. Denise. That woman had gone completely off the rails. She'd sent fake cops to intimidate me. Before I could even laugh at the insanity of it, two of them started climbing over the gate. I didn't reach for my gun yet, not because I didn't want to, but because I needed to be sure this was real. I watched as they stormed across my yard, barking orders like they were in some low-budget TV show. They tried to look professional, but their boots were clean, their movements sloppy. Real cops don't act like that. When they got close enough, I saw one of them had an HOA patch on his arm. I couldn't believe it. They'd actually branded their fake raid with the Homeowners Association logo. It was pathetic and hilarious all at once. Still, I wasn't about to let them set foot inside my home. I grabbed my phone, dialed a number I hadn't used in months. It rang once. "Yeah," a deep voice answered. "It's me," I said. "We've got a situation." That was all I needed to say. Within 10 minutes, I heard the low growl of engines, not cars this time, but motorcycles. A dozen headlights appeared in the distance, moving fast, closing in from the road behind the ranch. My crew had been heading back to town when they got the call. And when the brothers roll out, they don't come quiet. The sound of Harley engines filled the night like thunder rolling over the plains. The fake cops froze, looking around like they'd just realized how deep they were in. I could see panic flicker across their faces as the bikes surrounded the SUVs in a tightening circle, engines revving, lights flashing. I stepped down from the porch, slow and deliberate, the crunch of gravel loud under my boots. The leader tried to bark orders again, but his voice cracked. "Who the hell do you think you are?" he shouted. I smiled. "The owner of this ranch." He reached for something on his belt, maybe a weapon, maybe just nerves, but before he could move, a dozen boots hit the ground as my crew dismounted. Leather jackets glinting under the headlights, tattoos catching the light, faces hard and cold. "You picked the wrong ranch, pal," one of my buddies said, his voice low like a growl. The fake cops looked around, realizing they were outnumbered, outmatched, and standing in the middle of nowhere. That's when I saw a flash of movement from the porch. My dog, Duke, a massive German shepherd, came barreling out with a bark that shook the night. He stopped right beside me, teeth bared, eyes locked on the intruders. I raised my hand. "You boys better start explaining real quick before things get ugly." But they didn't answer. They started backing toward their SUVs, hands shaking, adrenaline running dry. One of them dropped his fake badge. It clattered to the ground like a piece of cheap tin. I picked it up, turned it over in my hand, and said, "You tell Denise next time she wants to play sheriff, she better bring the real ones." They left in a hurry, tires kicking up dust, engines screaming down the road until the night swallowed them whole. When it was all over, I stood there with my crew, the hum of bikes still in the air. The quiet returned, heavy but calm. My brothers laughed, cussed, and patted me on the back. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Denise wasn't the type to give up, she was the type to double down. The morning after that fake raid, the ranch was quiet again, but not in a peaceful way. It was that kind of silence that hangs in the air before a storm hits, too still, too heavy. I didn't sleep much that night. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with calls and texts from the crew, everyone making sure I was good, offering to stand watch, to stick around. But I told them to go home. We weren't running a war camp, not yet. When the sun finally came up, I walked the property line, coffee in hand, boots crunching through the dirt. The tire tracks from the SUVs were still there, carved deep into the road like scars. Duke trotted beside me, nose down, tail stiff, picking up the scent of those bastards. He was still agitated, and honestly, so was I. I found something near the gate that made my stomach tighten, a dropped ID card, laminated, clean, with a fake county emblem printed on it. Enforcement Division. It was laughable, but it also meant one thing: Denise's little stunt had been organized. This wasn't just a few people playing dress-up. Someone had spent money printing badges, ordering tactical gear, and renting SUVs. She had turned her HOA into her own private militia. By noon, word had spread. The sheriff, an old friend of mine named Carl, came by in his cruiser. He stepped out slow, hat in hand, his expression caught somewhere between concern and disbelief. "Morning, Jake," he said, glancing at the tire marks. "Heard you had some visitors last night." "Yeah," I said, sipping my coffee. "They called themselves law enforcement." Carl sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "We got a few calls about gunfire," I told dispatch to ignore it. "Figured it was just your crew revving engines again." "You saying they weren't real cops?" "Not even close," I said, handing him the fake badge I picked up. He turned it over, eyes narrowing. "Damn. That's serious." "You think?" I said, voice hardening. "They came in here armed, trespassing, pretending to be officers." "That's not a prank, that's a felony." Carl nodded. "I'll file a report, but you know how this goes. The DA's office will drag its feet. Denise's husband is on the county board, and she's got friends in high places. They'll call it a misunderstanding." That's when I realized this was bigger than a neighbor feud. This was about power, about control. Denise and her people weren't just enforcing petty HOA rules, they were trying to expand their reach. They wanted my land. After Carl left, I went inside and sat at my kitchen table. Sunlight was streaming through the window, catching on the dust particles floating in the air. I opened my laptop and pulled up the property records. Sure enough, my name was still on every acre, clean and legal. But then I saw something else. There was a recent community development zoning request filed by the HOA for an expansion of jurisdiction. The map outlined their target area, and my ranch was dead center. I leaned back in my chair, jaw tightening. Denise wasn't just trying to scare me. She was laying groundwork to take my land by legal manipulation. That evening, I called the crew back to the ranch. Not for a ride, for a meeting. We gathered around the big table in the barn, the smell of motor oil and leather mixing with the faint scent of hay. The guys were restless, angry, and ready for payback. Hawk, one of my oldest friends and the road captain, slammed his fist on the table. "Brother, we can't let this slide," he said. "They came into your house. Pretending to be cops. That's crossing every damn line." "I know," I said quietly. "But we do this smart. No fights. No heat. We hit them where it hurts." "How's that?" Hawk asked. I slid the printed map across the table, showing them the zoning request. "They want to take my land. That means they filed paperwork. That means there's a trail." Grim, the tech guy of the crew, leaned in and grinned. "So we dig." Over the next week, that's exactly what we did. Grim hacked through public databases, HOA records, and county filings. Turns out, Denise had been moving money around, HOA dues, maintenance funds, and beautification projects that never happened. All of it tied to a shell account under her name. We didn't confront her yet. We gathered evidence, screenshots, recordings, everything. And when we were ready, we made sure to leak just a taste of it, anonymously, to the local news station. By Friday, her picture was all over town. HOA president accused of misusing community funds. The story spread fast. People started whispering in grocery stores, canceling HOA meetings, asking for audits. I thought maybe that would slow her down. But I underestimated how dangerous desperate people become when they're cornered. 2 nights later, I was closing up the barn when I heard engines again, but these weren't Harleys. They were trucks. I turned off the lights and stepped outside, standing in the shadows. 2 pickup trucks pulled up near the fence line, headlights off. A group of men jumped out, carrying something long and metal. I knew the sound before I even saw it, crowbars. I moved quietly toward the side of the house, shotgun in hand, safety still on. Duke stayed low beside me, ears perked. I watched as they started pulling down my private property signs and replacing them with new ones that read under HOA regulation. They were literally trying to claim my land in the middle of the night. I stepped forward, pumped the shotgun once, and the sound cracked through the still air like thunder. The men froze. "Drop M," I said, voice calm but cold. They turned slowly, faces ghost-white under the moonlight. "You boys sure you want to do this?" I continued. "Because the last ones who came here left a lot faster than they arrived." One of them dropped his sign and bolted. The others followed, stumbling over each other trying to reach their trucks. They peeled out, gravel flying. When they were gone, I stood there for a long time, the only sound the wind and Duke's low growl fading into a whine. I knew it now for certain, they weren't done. The next morning, I found my mailbox smashed, my fence cut in 2 places, and one of my cattle missing. The cops came again, but this time, Carl didn't even take notes. "We can't prove it's them," he said. "Then I will," I replied. So we set up cameras. Hidden ones. Grim helped me wire the place like a fortress. Every gate, every barn door, even the driveway had eyes now. And sure enough, 3 nights later, they came again, different faces, same mission. Only this time, I let the cameras roll. They broke in through the side gate, walked up to the barn, and started taking photos. One of them even spray-painted HOA property on my wall. I didn't confront them that time. I let them finish, then sent the footage straight to the sheriff and the local news. The next day, the entire town saw it on TV, men in tactical gear vandalizing private property. The HOA was cornered now, and Denise knew exactly who was behind the leak. The phone calls started. First polite, then threatening. I ignored them. But then, late one night, she showed up herself. I was on the porch again, watching the stars, when her car pulled up the driveway, a silver SUV, polished like she was arriving at a country club. She stepped out, high heels sinking in the dirt, that same fake smile plastered on her face. "Mr. Tanner," she said smoothly. "May I have a word?" "Make it quick," I said, leaning against the railing. She glanced around, clearly uncomfortable out here without her entourage. "I think we've gotten off on the wrong foot. I represent the interests of this community, and your activities are making people nervous." "My activities?" I said, tone sharp. "You mean existing on my own land?" Her eyes narrowed, the fake smile slipping. "This land is crucial for the future development of our community. It would be in your best interest to cooperate. We could offer compensation." I laughed. "Lady, you sent fake cops into my home. You vandalized my property. And now you want to buy me out. You've got some nerve." Her composure cracked then. "You don't know who you're dealing with." I stepped forward, just enough for her to see the fury in my eyes. "Neither do you." She turned on her heel and left, tires spinning as she tore down the drive. I knew she wasn't bluffing. Whatever she was planning next, it was going to be bigger, meaner, and a whole lot uglier. That night, I sat in my garage surrounded by my brothers, the air thick with tension. The bikes gleamed under the lights, lined up like soldiers. Hawk poured a shot of whiskey and handed it to me. "So what's the plan, Jake?" he asked. I stared at the glass for a long moment before answering. "We defend what's ours. No guns, no fists, just truth. We'll finish this the way we started, together." Outside, the wind howled across the plains, carrying dust and the faint smell of rain. It felt like the land itself was bracing for something, a reckoning. And deep down, I knew it was coming. The next few days passed like a fuse slowly burning down. Every sunrise felt heavier, like the air itself was waiting for the explosion. My crew came and went, checking in, helping out, keeping the place locked down. But even with their laughter echoing through the barn and the sound of wrenches clinking against metal, there was tension underneath it all, quiet, simmering, dangerous. I'd seen a lot in my life. Served time in the military, hauled rigs across every corner of this country, seen people rise and fall in ways you couldn't imagine. But I'd never seen the kind of arrogance that Denise and her little army carried. They thought they could twist laws, fake authority, and bully their way into my life. And for a while, I thought maybe I could outsmart them with patience. Maybe exposing their lies would be enough. But I was wrong. The first sign came that Thursday morning. I woke up to the sound of heavy machinery rumbling down the road. When I stepped outside, I saw it, a construction truck parked right across from my gate, bright orange cones lined up around it, and a big sign hammered into the ground that read, "Future site of Oak Hollow Estates expansion, approved by HOA." I stood there staring at it, coffee mug in hand, my blood boiling. They hadn't even gotten approval from the county. This was intimidation, pure and simple. A statement. A way of saying, "We're coming, and you can't stop us." That's when I decided, enough playing nice. I grabbed my phone, called Hawk. "Round up the boys," I said. "It's time we remind them what community really looks like." By that afternoon, a dozen bikes were lined up at the gate, engines idling, exhaust pipes growling low and steady like thunder before a storm. We didn't wear patches that said outlaws or angels. We weren't criminals. But we were brothers, bound by loyalty thicker than any law Denise could twist. We didn't go there to start trouble. We went there to send a message. We rolled into town slow, steady, a wall of steel and leather. People watched from sidewalks, phones out, recording, whispering. They all knew about the feud by now, it was the talk of every diner and hardware store for miles. When we pulled up in front of the HOA's pristine little office, I killed the engine and stepped off my bike. The HOA building was small, glass doors, white brick walls, and a fresh, "No trespassing, authorized personnel only" sign taped to the door. It was almost funny, considering how they trespassed on my land. I walked right up and pushed the door open. The woman at the front desk nearly dropped her coffee when she saw me. "You can't be here," she stammered. "Sure I can," I said calmly. "Public property. I'm just here to talk." Before she could call for help, Denise stepped out of her office, heels clicking on the tile like gunshots. Her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Mr. Tanner," she said sweetly, "I suggest you leave before I have to involve law enforcement." I chuckled. "You mean the same law enforcement you pretended to send to my ranch?" Her face twitched, just a flicker, but I caught it. "You think you're untouchable," I said. "But I've got the footage, the proof, the news stories, and a whole town watching you." She crossed her arms, still trying to hold her composure. "You've made quite the mess, Mr. Tanner. You've defamed our association, interfered with community development, and now you're threatening me on public property." "I'm not threatening you," I said, voice low. "I'm promising you, if you or your people step on my land again, it won't be a conversation next time." Her smile faltered. "You think your biker friends make you powerful? You're just a man with a barn full of grease monkeys. I have the law. I have influence." I leaned in close enough for her perfume to hit my nose, expensive, artificial, like her. "You've got fear. That's all you've got. And it's running out." I turned and walked out before she could answer, my boots echoing across the floor. When I stepped outside, the crew was waiting, engines rumbling, eyes on me. I gave them a small nod, and one by one, they revved their engines, a mechanical roar that rattled the windows of that perfect little office. Then we rolled out, leaving behind a cloud of dust and defiance. That night, I sat on the porch again, the moon hanging low, crickets humming, a bottle of whiskey open beside me. Duke lay at my feet, calm but alert. The stillness was almost peaceful, until I heard the drone. It was faint at first, a high-pitched buzz in the distance. I squinted into the dark and saw it, a small drone hovering over my property, lights blinking red and white. They were spying on me now. I stood up, walked inside, grabbed my rifle, and stepped back out. Took a deep breath, aimed, and pulled the trigger. The drone dropped like a stone into the dirt, its plastic frame shattering on impact. I walked over, picked it up, and sure enough, there was a tiny HOA sticker on the side. The nerve of these people was unreal. By the next morning, the footage of that drone being shot down was online. Someone had been watching from the road, filming the whole thing. Denise twisted the story, of course, said I'd destroyed HOA property and posed a danger to the community. She even managed to get a temporary injunction filed against me, claiming I was harassing and intimidating volunteers. The sheriff called me in that afternoon. Carl looked tired when I walked into his office, papers piled high on his desk. "Jake," he said, "you're walking a thin line, brother. They're pushing hard. County lawyers are breathing down my neck." "Let them," I said. "You know damn well who started this." He nodded slowly. "I do. But you gotta be careful. These people are trying to bait you into crossing the line." "I already did," I said, standing up. "It's drawn right through my front yard." Back at the ranch, things only escalated. Flyers started showing up in town, my face printed on them with the words, "Violent threat to community safety." They were tacking them to telephone poles, posting them online. But the thing about small towns is, people talk. And people know. By the weekend, half the town was on my side. Farmers, old vets, folks who'd had enough of the HOA's nonsense. They started showing up at my gate, offering food, fuel, and just plain support. It wasn't just my fight anymore. One night, a convoy of pickup trucks showed up carrying lumber, nails, and wire. "We heard they're trying to push you out," one of the guys said. "Figure we'll help you build the wall back up." By sunrise, there was a new fence, taller, stronger, and lined with cameras. The whole crew worked through the night, sweat and laughter mixing with the sound of hammers hitting wood. When we were done, I looked at the wall we'd built together, not just to keep them out, but to mark something sacred. It wasn't just my land anymore, it was a stand against every bully who thought power came from a title or a fake badge. Denise must have lost her mind when she saw it. The next day, I caught her SUV parked across the road, her face pale behind tinted glass, phone pressed to her ear. She stayed there for almost an hour, watching, fuming. Then she drove off, tires spinning. But what she did next made everything that came before look like child's play. 2 days later, I got a certified letter in the mail, thick envelope, official stamp, the whole 9 yards. Inside was a notice, HOA condemnation and seizure order for community integration. It was fake, of course, but damn convincing. It claimed my property had been absorbed into the HOA district due to public infrastructure needs. That was it. I knew the storm had finally hit. I called an emergency meeting that night. Every brother showed up. The barn was lit, the air thick with tension and the smell of gasoline. I stood in front of them, the fake letter in my hand. "They've declared war," I said. "And we're not backing down." The room filled with murmurs, anger, resolve. Hawk stood up, his voice steady. "Then we stand our ground." I nodded. "We don't fight dirty. We don't break the law. But we make damn sure they regret coming after us." We spent the next day preparing, securing the property, backing up footage, setting up alarms. It wasn't paranoia anymore, it was survival. That night, the clouds rolled in, lightning flashing over the hills, rain pounding the ground. Duke barked at every rumble of thunder, pacing near the door. I sat there, watching the monitors, waiting for the next move. And when it came fast. At 1:14 a.m., the alarms went off, motion sensors flashing red. Multiple vehicles approaching from the east. I zoomed in on the cameras, black SUVs again, same as before. But this time, they weren't pretending to be cops. This time, they were coming for a fight. I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and walked out into the storm. My crew was already outside, engines roaring to life one by one. Rain hammered down on the metal roof, thunder rolling like artillery. We took our positions, not to attack, but to defend. The SUVs skidded to a stop outside the gate, lights cutting through the rain. The doors opened, and figures stepped out, maybe 10, maybe more. They started yelling, demanding I come out, claiming authority again. But before they could take another step, the roar of engines echoed through the night, my brothers arriving from every direction, headlights slicing through the downpour. Within seconds, they had surrounded the intruders, bikes circling, mud flying. The fake cops froze, realizing just how outnumbered they were. I stepped forward, rain running down my face, voice steady. "This is private property," I said. "Leave. Now." They hesitated. One of them raised his voice. "You're trespassing on HOA land." That made me laugh, loud and sharp. "Buddy, this land's been mine longer than you've been out of high school." Lightning cracked overhead, illuminating everything for a split second, the bikes, the mud, the fear on their faces. And that's when they backed off. One by one, they got back in their vehicles, engines sputtering as they peeled out down the road. The crew cheered, engines roaring in victory, but I didn't celebrate. Because I knew, this wasn't the end. Denise wasn't the kind of woman who lost quietly. No, this was just the calm before the final storm. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving the ranch soaked, muddy, and quiet again. The rain had washed away the tire tracks, but not the memory of the night before. The boys were still around, some sleeping on couches in the barn, others sitting by the fire pit, brewing coffee over the crackling wood. The smell of wet earth and smoke mixed with the faint scent of motor oil, a smell I'd grown to love over the years. I stood at the fence line, the morning sun breaking through gray clouds, steam rising off the soaked grass. Duke sat beside me, ears twitching every time a crow cawed in the distance. For a moment, I thought maybe that was it, maybe we'd scared them enough. But deep down, I knew better. People like Denise don't stop when they lose. They double down. By mid-morning, the news trucks started showing up. The footage of the storm night standoff had already gone viral, someone from town must have filmed it. The headline read, "Local rancher defends property from HOA intrusion." Cameras, microphones, reporters, they all wanted interviews, statements, sound bites. I didn't want any of it. I told them, I'm just a man defending his home. That's all there is to it. But the story didn't die there. It spread, online, across counties, into forums and social media pages. People started sending donations, offering legal help, even bikers from other states reaching out, calling me brother, and saying they'd ride down if things got worse. It felt like an army was forming, not of violence, but of people who were done being pushed around. Then came the letter that broke whatever patience I had left. It arrived the next afternoon, hand-delivered by a courier in a suit. He didn't say a word, just handed me a thick envelope and walked away. I tore it open on the spot. Inside was a formal document, this time signed by Denise herself. It accused me of illegal gatherings, operating a commercial business on residential property, and environmental disruption. It ended with one line that burned into my brain: if you do not vacate the premises within 30 days, we will pursue full legal repossession of the property. That was it, the breaking point. That night, I called a meeting with the crew, but this one was different. The barn was dimly lit, candles flickering, the air heavy. Everyone was there: Hawk, grim, diesel, even old tank, who'd been off the road for years. They knew this wasn't just another standoff. I stood in front of them, holding the letter. "They're not backing down," I said. "They're trying to bury me under paperwork, make it legal, make it clean. But I'm not leaving. Not for them, not for anyone." Hawk leaned forward, arms crossed. "What's the play?" "We build louder than they lie," I said. "We make sure the whole damn world knows what they're doing." And that's what we did. The next week became a blur of cameras, calls, and chaos. Journalists camped out at the end of my driveway. Bloggers, activists, even a few politicians started using my name to talk about property rights and freedom. I didn't care about politics, I just wanted my life back. But in all that noise, something strange started happening. Denise disappeared. No calls, no sightings, no meetings. The HOA went silent. Even the people who used to defend her stopped showing up to her office. It was eerie, like the eye of the storm. Then, one morning, I woke up to the sound of engines again. But this time, it wasn't my crew. It was law enforcement, real this time. Sheriff Carl stepped out of his cruiser, hat in hand, eyes full of regret. Behind him were two unmarked government cars and a handful of men in suits. "Jake," Carl said softly. "We need to talk." I tensed. "What now?" He hesitated. "We got a federal complaint, something about unauthorized weapons, illegal surveillance equipment, and harassment." I stared at him. "You're kidding." He shook his head. "I'm not. It's coming from the HOA's legal team. They're saying you threatened federal employees. They've twisted every word, every video." My jaw clenched. "You know that's bull." "I do," he said. "But these guys don't care. They've got paperwork, and paperwork talks louder than truth sometimes." Behind him, one of the agents stepped forward. "We just need to take a quick look around your property, Mr. Tanner." Routine. I knew the game. They weren't here to look, they were here to intimidate. I looked at Carl, then back at them. "You got a warrant?" They exchanged a glance. "Not yet." "Then you're not stepping foot past that gate," I said, voice calm but sharp as glass. Carl sighed, rubbing his temples. "Jake, please don't make this harder." "I'm not making it hard," I said. "They are." After a few tense moments, they backed off, said they'd be back with proper paperwork. As their cars drove away, Hawk walked up beside me, lighting a cigarette. "They're scared of you," he said. I nodded slowly. "Good. They should be." That night, the ranch felt colder. Even with the fire burning and my brothers around, there was a heaviness in the air. Duke kept pacing near the windows, restless. I couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to break. Around midnight, I got a text, an unknown number. It read, "You should have sold when you had the chance." Then a video link. I clicked it. It was footage, grainy, shaky, of my barn, taken from the road. Then, seconds later, a flash of light. Explosion. My heart stopped. I ran outside, barefoot, sprinting through the wet grass. The barn was already engulfed in flames, the fire roaring high into the sky. My bikes, my tools, the photos on the wall, everything I'd built for years, burning. My crew came running from their trailers, yelling, grabbing hoses, buckets, anything. But it was useless. The fire ate through wood and steel like it was paper. The heat was blinding, the air thick with smoke. I stood there, choking on ash, watching it all go up. Carl showed up 20 minutes later with the fire trucks. The blaze was too far gone to save. They just stood there, spraying water, doing their best. When the flames finally died down, the barn was nothing but blackened beams and smoke. I walked through the rubble, boots crunching on burnt debris. I found the remains of one of my bikes, the same one I'd ridden across half the country. The chrome was warped, melted. Carl walked up beside me, his voice low. "We'll find who did this." I looked at him. "You already know who did this." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The next morning, the town was buzzing again. Photos of the fire spread everywhere. Donations poured in, but I didn't want sympathy, I wanted justice. And justice, I decided, wasn't going to come through the courts. I spent the next day in silence, rebuilding what I could. The crew stayed close, nobody saying much. That evening, as the sun set behind the blackened barn, Hawk walked over with a small box. "What's this?" I asked. He opened it. Inside was a metal plate, the kind you'd bolt onto a bike. It was scorched and bent, but still legible. It read, "Freedom Riders, Brothers Forever." It had survived the fire. That hit me harder than anything else. "We're still standing," Hawk said quietly. I nodded. "Then we keep standing." The next morning, I filed my own legal motion, a full counterclaim against the HOA. Fraud, impersonation of officers, illegal trespass, vandalism, and harassment. Every document, every video, every witness statement went into that file. It was time to fight them on their own turf, legally, publicly, relentlessly. Within 48 hours, my case went viral again. Reporters, lawyers, ex-HOA members, everyone started turning against Denise. The pressure cracked her little empire wide open. Then, one evening, Carl called me. "Jake," he said, voice low. "We've got her." I froze. "Got who?" "Denise. FBI picked her up this morning. Fraud, forgery, impersonating federal officers. She's done." For the first time in weeks, I sat down, silent. It didn't feel like victory, not yet. It just felt like the war was finally ending. That night, the crew gathered again around the ashes of the barn. The stars were out, the air cool, calm. Someone brought out a speaker, played a slow country song. The sound drifted through the still night, soft and sad. We drank, laughed, remembered, because that's what brothers do when they've been through hell and made it out breathing. The ranch wasn't whole yet. The barn was gone, the scars still fresh. But it was mine. And no one was ever taking it from me again. The morning after Denise's arrest felt different, quieter, lighter. For the first time in months, I woke up without that heavy knot of dread sitting in my chest. The sun cut through the mist rolling over the valley, turning the wet grass gold. I stood on the porch, coffee in hand, watching Duke chase a rabbit near the old oak tree. The land looked peaceful again. The headlines were everywhere, HOA president arrested in fraud and impersonation scandal. News vans that had camped on my road for weeks were now chasing her story instead of mine. The narrative had flipped, I wasn't the villain anymore. I was the man who stood his ground and exposed corruption. But even with the justice system finally working, I couldn't shake the ghosts of what I'd lost. The barn was still just black and timber. The bikes, the tools, the years of sweat, gone. Every time I walked by it, I felt something twist inside me. That night, I sat by the ashes alone, nursing a bottle of bourbon. The fire pit crackled softly, its glow bouncing off the charred metal of what used to be my Harley. The crew had gone home for a few days, we all needed rest. I thought about my father, about how proud he'd been of this ranch. He used to tell me, "Son, land is more than dirt, it's memory. It's where your blood mixes with the earth." I whispered those words into the night, my voice barely louder than the wind. "Don't worry, Dad," I said quietly. "They didn't take it. They never will." That's when I made a promise, not just to myself, but to everyone who'd stood beside me through this storm. I wasn't just going to rebuild the barn. I was going to rebuild everything. Stronger. Bolder. Untouchable. The very next morning, I went to work. We cleared the rubble piece by piece. I rented heavy equipment, ordered lumber, tools, and steel. Word spread fast, and soon half the town showed up to help: farmers, mechanics, old friends, even strangers who'd seen the videos online. Everyone brought something. One guy showed up with a truck full of nails. Another brought plywood. Someone else donated lights. By noon, the air was filled with the sound of hammers and laughter. The smell of sawdust replaced the stench of smoke. Hawk pulled up around sunset, grinning ear to ear. "You're rebuilding already?" "Damn right," I said. "They tried to burn me down, so I'm rising twice as high." He clapped me on the shoulder. "That's the Jake I know." Days turned into weeks. The new barn started to take shape: steel beams, reinforced walls, thick concrete foundation. We painted it black and red, the Freedom Riders colors, with a huge iron insignia bolted to the front that read, "Home of the Free." When it was finally done, we held a ride, not a protest, not a parade, but a celebration. Bikers from across the state rolled in, hundreds of them, chrome gleaming in the afternoon sun, engines roaring like thunder across the valley. People lined the road, waving flags, holding signs that said, "Stand your ground, Jake," and "Freedom ain't for sale." It felt like redemption on two wheels. As the sun dipped behind the hills, we parked our bikes in a massive semicircle around the new barn. Someone set up a bonfire, music started playing, old rock, country, a few blues tracks that cut straight to the soul. I climbed up onto one of the hay bales, the firelight painting everything gold and orange. "Brothers, sisters, neighbors," I said, raising my glass. "They tried to take this land with lies, fear, and fake badges. But we didn't fold. We didn't break. We stood. This land, this barn, this life, it's proof that when you fight for what's right, you can't be burned down." The crowd roared. Engines revved. Someone yelled, "To Jake Tanner." I smiled. To all of us. The roar that followed could have shaken mountains. We partied deep into the night, music, laughter, firelight dancing off every chrome surface. It wasn't just a victory party, it was closure. Every scar, every fight, every sleepless night, it all meant something now. Around midnight, I stepped away from the noise and walked toward the far end of the property. The stars were bright, the kind you only see when you're miles from city lights. The ranch stretched out before me, endless and quiet. Hawk joined me, a beer in hand. "Hell of a ride, huh?" he said. I nodded. "Yeah. Hell of a ride." He looked out at the land. "So what now?" I smiled faintly. "Now. I live. Maybe start teaching kids how to ride, fix engines, maybe even run events here. Keep this place alive." He grinned. "You always were a stubborn bastard." "Guess it paid off," I said, smirking. For a while, we just stood there in silence. The wind carried the sound of laughter from the barn. It was the sound of victory, not the kind that comes with trophies, but the kind that comes when you've taken your life back with your own two hands. A few weeks later, the court finalized everything. Denise pleaded guilty to multiple charges. The HOA she'd run was dissolved, its board members investigated, its assets frozen. The neighborhood she tried to control broke free, forming a new, independent community council, this time honest, transparent, and fair. When the news came through, I sat in my truck, staring at the papers, and let out a long breath. It was over. No more battles, no more threats, no more fake cops. Just peace. But something in me had changed forever. The ranch wasn't just my home anymore, it was a symbol. People started visiting just to see the Freedom Barn, taking photos, shaking my hand. A few called me a hero. I didn't feel like one. I was just a man who refused to kneel. A year later, we held a charity ride in memory of everyone who'd ever lost something to corruption or power. We rode through the valley, hundreds of bikes strong, the sun glinting off the chrome, engines rumbling like thunder rolling across the plains. I led the ride, Duke's ashes in a small steel urn strapped to my bike. He'd passed that spring, old and tired, but free till the end. When we reached the overlook, we stopped, engines idling, the valley stretching below us like a painting. I held the urn up, whispered, "You're home, buddy," and let the wind take him. The ashes caught the light, swirling away into the golden air. When I turned back, Hawk gave me a nod. "He'd be proud," he said. I nodded. So would Dad. We rode back slow, the sun dipping behind us, casting long shadows over the open road. As we neared the ranch, I saw the new sign glinting in the distance, bold, unbreakable letters, Tanner Ranch, home of the free. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled without pain. Because I'd learned something through it all, that freedom isn't about land, money, or power. It's about standing your ground when everything else tries to push you down. It's about brotherhood, loyalty, and the kind of courage that can't be bought or burned. That night, as the stars came out over the valley, I sat on the porch with a cold drink in hand, the hum of crickets in the air. The ranch was quiet, alive, at peace. I looked up at the sky and whispered, "We made it." The wind carried my words out into the night, soft, proud, unbroken. Because in the end, I didn't just win a fight. I kept my soul. And that's something no HOA, no fake cop, no corrupt empire could ever take away.